My parents mailed a box for my son. He ripped the paper, looked inside and froze. Why would they do this? He whispered, pushing it toward me. I lifted the lid and felt my stomach drop. 5 hours later, I called the police. When my parents mailed a package for my 10-year-old son, I thought it was just another box of cookies and old family trinkets. But the moment Ethan tore the wrapping and looked inside, his face froze, his voice dropped to a whisper. Why would they do this? He pushed the box toward me, and when I lifted the lid, my stomach dropped. 5 hours later, I was on the phone with the police. Before I tell you what was inside, make sure you hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what happened next. My name is Claire and I live in a small town in Ohio with my son Ethan. He's 10 years old, smart, kind, and the center of my world. I work as a nurse and life isn't easy, but we've built a safe, happy home together. Most days are simple. School, homework, baseball practice, and bedtime stories. That's the life I want for him. Normal, steady, free of the chaos. I grew up in my relationship with my parents. Margaret and Thomas is complicated. They live in Pennsylvania and for most of my adult life we've been distant. My mother has always been controlling, quick to criticize, and my father stayed quiet, letting her words cut deeper. After years of that, I pulled away. I wanted something different for Ethan. Still, they sometimes send packages, toys, cookies, small gifts for Ethan. He loves getting them, and I've let it continue because I don't want to punish him for my history with them. He doesn't understand the sharp edges of the past, and I'd rather keep it that way for as long as I can. That morning when the package arrived, Ethan's eyes lit up. He ran to the table, tearing the paper with the excitement only a child can have. He looked up at me with a grin. "Mom, maybe this one's full of baseball cards. Grandpa said he used to collect them." I smiled back, though inside I felt a flicker of unease. Maybe. Let's see what they sent this time. What happened next made me question everything I thought I knew about my parents, and it changed the way I see them forever. Ethan was still grinning when he pulled back. The first layer of wrapping inside was a cardboard box with my parents' return address stamped neatly across the top. He ripped at the tape with his small fingers, but as soon as he lifted the flaps, his excitement vanished. His face stiffened, his mouth half open like he wanted to speak, but couldn't. Slowly, he pushed the box toward me and whispered, "Why would they do this?" My stomach tightened. I pulled the box closer, my hands trembling as I parted. The tissue paper neatly folded inside. At first, it looked ordinary clothes folded too carefully, almost like they belonged in a drawer, not in a package. On top was a faded pink dress, one I recognized instantly. Even though I hadn't seen it in years, it belonged to my younger sister, Lydia. My breath caught in my throat. Lydia had died in a car accident when she was just 16. I was 18 at the time, and I had carried the guilt of that night for years, even though it wasn't my fault. She had been riding with friends. I wasn't even there, but my mother never forgave me for living while Lydia didn't. I lifted the dress out of the box with shaking hands. The fabric was worn, but I knew it as well as my own skin. It was the same dress Lydia wore in our last family photo, the one that sat on my mother's mantel for years. Underneath the dress was Lydia's old hairbrush, the handle cracked, strands of her hair still tangled in the bristles. My chest tightened and tears blurred my vision. Ethan's voice pulled me back. "Mom, whose dress is that? Why would Grandma send us old clothes?" I wanted to protect him from the truth, but there was no easy answer. I set the dress down gently and tried to steady my voice. "It belonged to Aunt Lydia. She passed away a long time ago." He frowned. "So why would they give it to me?" That was the question echoing in my mind. Why now? Why send me Lydia's things after all these years? I reached back into the box, my heart pounding, and pulled out a photograph. It was of Lydia and me, standing side by side, arms wrapped around each other. We were smiling, carefree, but what froze me wasn't the picture itself. On the back in my mother's handwriting were 5 words. "You should have been the one." The room tilted. I sat down hard in the chair, clutching the photo, my hands sweating. I could almost hear my mother's voice saying it, the same cold tone she used years ago when she would compare me to Lydia. "Why couldn't you be more like her? Why are you still here when she's gone?" The words had haunted me as a teenager, and now she had carved them into this message, sending it to me through my son. I felt sick. This wasn't a gift. This was a warning, a deliberate attempt to reopen old wounds, but it wasn't. Over at the bottom of the box, wrapped tightly in crinkled paper, was something that made my blood run cold. It was a small glass vial sealed with a metal cap, and inside was a clear liquid across the label. Written in black marker were just 2 letters. L. Dean, Lydia's initials. I stared at it, my pulse racing. Was it just water? Perfume? Something harmless? Or was it something far worse? The fact that my parents had sent it in this context made it feel sinister. Ethan leaned closer, curiosity in his voice. "What is that, Mom?" I quickly pushed the vial out of his reach and snapped the box shut. My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Don't touch it." He stepped back, his eyes wide. I took a breath, trying to soften. I don't know what it is, but it's not safe. Fear settled over me like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about emotional manipulation anymore. My parents had said something dangerous, or at least meant for it to look that way. Either possibility terrified me. Memories of my childhood came flooding back. My mother's constant criticism, her sharp words, her obsession with Lydia's memory, my father's silence, his refusal to ever stand up to her. They had always found ways to make me feel small, guilty, unworthy. But this was different. This was calculated. I carried the box into my bedroom, locked the door, and set it in the closet as far out of Ethan's sight as possible. I sat on the edge of my bed, the photo still in my hand, and tried to make sense of it. My parents were cruel, but would they go this far? Were they trying to scare me, to punish me, or was there something even darker behind this? Ethan knocked softly on the door. "Mom, did I do something wrong?" My heart broke. Hearing those words, I opened the door and pulled him into a hug. "No, baby, none of this is your fault." I kissed the top of his head, holding him tighter than usual. "I promise I'll take care of it," but inside I was shaking. I didn't know what to do next. What I did know was that this wasn't something I could ignore. The box wasn't just a package, it was a threat, and I had to decide how far I was willing to go to protect my son from the people who were supposed to love us most. I sat on the edge of my bed for what felt like hours, staring at the closed closet door where I had hidden the box. My hands still smelled faintly of the old fabric from Lydia's dress, and the words on the back of the photograph echoed in my head. "You should have been the one." Every time I repeated it to myself, it hit harder, like a knife twisting deeper. I knew my parents could be cruel, but this was beyond cruelty. This felt like something deliberate, something dangerous. I looked at Ethan curled up on the couch with his sketchpad, trying to act like nothing had happened. He was pretending to draw, but I could tell he was worried. Every few minutes, his eyes flicked toward me, waiting for reassurance. I forced a smile whenever he looked up, but inside I was unraveling. I needed to do something. I couldn't sit here and hope this was just another twisted attempt to control the violin. That box gnawed at me. I didn't know what it contained, and not knowing was almost worse than knowing. What if Ethan had opened it before me? What if it had broken in his hands? My stomach turned at the thought. The first person who came to mind was my brother Daniel. He and I weren't especially close, but he was the only family member who had ever understood how toxic our parents could be. He moved away years ago, carving out a life for himself in another state, and he rarely came home. Still, he had seen the same things I had. If anyone could give me perspective, it was him. I picked up my phone and dialed his number. My hand shook as I pressed it to my ear. It rang several times before he answered, his voice groggy. "Claire, everything okay?" "No," I whispered. "Something's wrong. It's Mom and Dad." There was a pause. Then his tone sharpened. "What happened?" I told him everything. The package, the dress, the photo, the vial with Lydia's initials. As I spoke, my voice cracked and I realized just how much fear I was carrying. Daniel was silent for a long time. After I finished, finally he sighed. "I'm not surprised." I blinked. "What do you mean you're not surprised?" "They've been slipping for years," he said quietly. "You cut them off, Claire. But I still get calls sometimes. Mom talks about Lydia, like she's still here. She blames you for moving on. Dad just sits in the background letting it happen. It's gotten worse." My chest tightened. "So you think they sent this on purpose to hurt me?" "I don't think, Claire. I know that photo. Those words. Who else would write that? And the vial. I don't even want to guess. Whatever it is, you can't take chances. If I were you, I'd call the police right now." His words made my throat go dry. Call the police? On my own parents? Part of me wanted to argue, to clinging to the hope that this was just some awful misunderstanding. But another part of me knew Daniel was right. If this had been sent by anyone else, I wouldn't hesitate. The only thing holding me back was the fact that it was them. "I don't know if I can," I admitted, my voice shaking. "They're still my parents." Daniel's voice hardened. "They stopped acting like parents a long time ago. You have Ethan to think about now. Do you really want him anywhere near this?" I glanced at Ethan, still bent over his sketchpad, humming softly to himself. The sight of his small shoulders, his fragile innocence, made something in me snap into focus. Daniel was right. I wasn't just Claire, the daughter who had been carrying her parents' weight for too long. I was Ethan's mother, and he needed me to be strong. "Okay?" I whispered. "I'll call good," Daniel said firmly. "And Claire, don't let them twist us in your mind. Protect yourself. Protect your son." When I hung up, I sat in silence for a moment, gathering my courage. Calling the police felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. It meant admitting out loud that my parents weren't just manipulative, they were dangerous. But the vial, the words on that photo, the way Ethan had looked at me in fear, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I picked up the phone again, this time dialing the non-emergency line for the local police department. My voice shook as I explained what had happened, what I had received, and how I feared for my son's safety. The dispatcher's tone was calm but serious. She told me an officer would come by to collect the package and speak with me when I hung up. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that I had finally taken action, dread over what would come next. My parents had always found ways to make me feel powerless, but this time I wasn't letting them win. I walked over to the couch and sat beside Ethan. He looked up at me with those wide, searching eyes. "Mom, are we okay?" I pulled him close, wrapping my arms around him. "Yes, baby, we're okay, I promise." Inside though, I knew that promise could only hold if I followed through. I had made my decision. The box was no longer just a package from my parents. It was evidence, and soon the police would know exactly what they had sent. The knock on my door that evening was heavier than usual. The kind of knock that told you someone official was on the other side. Ethan sat close to me on the couch, clutching his sketch pad against his chest like a shield. I stood slowly, my legs heavy, and opened the door to find two uniformed officers standing there. One was younger, tall, with kind eyes, and the other was older, gray around the temples, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Danning?" the older one asked. "Yes," I answered, my voice tight. "I'm Detective Harris, and this is Officer Martinez. We're here about the package you reported. May we come in?" I stepped aside and they entered. The air in the house felt different with them there, heavier but also safer. I pointed toward the bedroom where I had locked the box. Ethan stayed on the couch, silent, his wide eyes tracking every movement. I unlocked the closet and carefully lifted the box onto the bed. My hands trembled as I opened the lid again. The sight of Lydia's dress made my stomach twist, but I forced myself to keep my composure. I wanted the officers to see everything exactly as I had. Detective Harris put on a pair of gloves and began carefully lifting each item from the box. He examined the dress, the hairbrush, and then paused over the photograph. His eyes flicked to me as he read the back. "Did you know this would be inside?" I shook my head. I didn't even know they still had these things." My voice cracked and I swallowed hard. "The handwriting is my mother's." He gave a small nod, his expression stern but sympathetic. Then his gloved hand moved to the bottom of the box. When he lifted the vial wrapped in paper, my heart thudded so hard, I thought it might burst. The glass caught the light, the clear liquid inside shifting as he held it up. "This is what you were most concerned about?" he asked. "Yes," I whispered. "I don't know what it is, but the initials are Lydia's, and after everything else, I can't help but feel like it's meant to hurt me." Officer Martinez stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he studied the vial. "We'll need to take this to the lab for testing," he said firmly. "Do not under any circumstances try to open or handle something like this," as they secured the vial in a padded evidence bag. Ethan's small voice carried from the living room. "Mom, what are they doing?" I turned to him, forcing a calm smile. "They're just checking to make sure everything's safe, sweetheart." But inside I wasn't calm at all. I felt like the walls were closing in. Seeing the vial in the hands of law enforcement made the situation terrifyingly real. This wasn't just family drama anymore, this was an investigation. Detective Harris stayed behind to ask me questions while Officer Martinez took the box out to the patrol car. Harris sat across from me at the table, his notebook open. "You said your parents sent this?" "Yes. It came in the mail today." "The return address was theirs. Had they ever threatened you before?" I hesitated. "Not like this, but my mother, she said things. She's blamed me for my sister's death ever since it happened. She never let me forget it, and sending Lydia's belongings with that message." I shook my head, fighting tears. "It feels like she's escalating." He wrote quickly, nodding. "Do you believe your son was the intended recipient, or you?" The question made my blood run cold. I glanced at Ethan, who was pretending to color, but was clearly listening me. I whispered it was meant for me, but they knew he would open it first. They knew. Harris's expression hardened. "That's important. We'll move quickly on this." Hours passed, like slow-moving clouds. Ethan eventually fell asleep on the couch, his sketch pad slipping from his hands. I covered him with a blanket, my heart aching at how small he looked. He shouldn't have to live with this kind of fear. Near midnight, the phone rang. Detective Harris had left me his number, and when I picked up it was him. His voice was steady but carried weight. "Mrs. Danning, I wanted to update you. The vial has been tested." I gripped the phone tighter, bracing myself. "What was it?" There was a pause. Then his answer hit me like ice water. "It contained a toxic substance. Small amount, but dangerous enough if ingested." I sank into a chair, my whole body trembling. "Are you saying my parents sent poison to my home?" "I can't speculate on intent right now," Harris said carefully. "But the fact is they mailed you a hazardous substance along with items designed to cause psychological distress. That combination is deeply concerning. We'll be pursuing this as a criminal matter." My mouth went dry. "My parents, Margaret and Thomas were no longer just difficult, controlling people. They had crossed into something darker, something criminal, and the thought that Ethan could have been the one to open that vial made my stomach twist until I thought I might be sick. Harris's voice softened slightly. "You did the right thing calling us. I need you to know that this could have been much worse if you hadn't acted." When I hung up, I sat in silence, my mind spinning. For years, I had told myself that my parents' cruelty was just words, just manipulation, that if I stayed strong, they couldn't hurt me anymore. But now I realized how wrong I had been. They had found a way to reach into my life again, to use my son's innocence to deliver a message soaked in cruelty and danger. I walked over to Ethan, brushing the hair from his forehead as he slept. My hands still trembled, but my resolve was firm. My parents had shown me who they truly were. Now I had to show them that they no longer had any power over me. The box, the dress, the photo, the vial, they weren't just objects anymore. They were evidence of a line crossed of love, twisted into something unrecognizable. And as much as it broke my heart, I knew I could never look at Margaret and Thomas' parents again. The night after the police confirmed what was inside the vial, I barely slept. I kept replaying every moment of the day over in my mind. The look on Ethan's face when he opened the box, the familiar ache in my chest. When I touched Lydia's dress, the weight of the words written on the back of that photo. For so long, I had carried the burden of my parents' cruelty, quietly convincing myself it was just part of who they were. But now, with the evidence sealed away in police custody, I couldn't deny the truth anymore. My parents weren't just broken people clinging to grief. They were dangerous. In the morning, Ethan crawled into bed beside me, his hair sticking up in every direction, his face still soft with sleep. He leaned against me and whispered, "Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa bad people?" His question cut deeper than any wound my parents had ever given me. I held him close, my heart breaking as I searched for the right words. "They're people who made very bad choices." I finally said, "And those choices hurt me and they scared you, but I promise you they won't be part of our lives anymore. My job is to keep you safe, and that's what I'll always do." He didn't say anything after that, just nestled against me, and in that quiet moment, I knew I had made the right decision. For years, I had kept a thin line of contact open, thinking it was better for Ethan to know his grandparents in some way, but that line had been poisoned, and leaving it open any longer would only invite more danger. Later that week, Detective Harris called again to let me know the investigation was moving forward. My parents hadn't denied sending the package. In fact, my mother had reportedly said something chilling. When asked why she did it, according to Harris, she said, "Claire always needed to be reminded of what she took from us." Hearing those words secondhand was like being stabbed all over again. I had spent years trying to heal from Lydia's death, years, trying to remind myself that it wasn't my fault, but my mother had chosen to turn grief into a weapon, and this time she aimed it not only at me, but at my son. That was the moment. Something inside me shifted. I stopped feeling like a daughter still trying to win scraps of love from people who would never give it. I stopped carrying the guilt they had forced on me for so long. I wasn't just Claire, their child trapped under their shadow. I was Claire, the mother of Ethan, and my only responsibility was to him. Cutting them off completely wasn't easy. Part of me still felt the weight of obligation, the old voice in my head, whispering, "But they're your parents." But love isn't supposed to come wrapped in threats. Love isn't supposed to leave you trembling every time the phone rings or a package shows up at your door. Love certainly isn't supposed to put your child at risk. I blocked their numbers, gave strict instructions to the post office not to deliver anything from their address, and worked with the police to make sure any further contact would be documented. It felt like drawing a boundary line in the sand, firm and final, and though it hurt, it also felt like freedom. For the first time in years, I could breathe without waiting for the next cruel comment or manipulative gesture. I could focus on Ethan without the shadow of my parents' control hovering over us. And in that space, I started to rediscover something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. One evening, a few weeks after everything happened, Ethan and I sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the trees. He was quiet for a long time, then turned to me and said, "Mom, I'm glad it's just us." Tears filled my eyes, but this time they weren't from fear or guilt. They were from gratitude. Gratitude that he was safe, that we had survived this, and that I finally had the strength to protect him in the way I should have. All along, looking back, I realized the package wasn't just a box filled with old belongings. It was a test, a brutal one, but it forced me to make a choice I had been avoiding for years. It made me confront the truth about my parents and finally break free from their hold. And if there's one thing I've learned from this, it's that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most can also cause the deepest wounds, but you don't have to keep letting them. Protecting yourself and the people who depend on you is not betrayal, it's survival. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this: you have the right to choose safety over obligation. You have the right to protect your peace, even if it means shutting the door on people who share your blood. This is the lesson I want Ethan to grow up knowing, that love is shown through care, through kindness, and through safety, not through fear. And as long as I'm here, that's the only kind of love he will ever know. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more powerful true stories like this and share in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away from someone in your family to protect your own peace? I'd love to hear your thoughts.